Okay, we're live.
Well, not live. Recording. All right. Eric, why don't you kick us off this time?
Oh, I'm not the good person at kicking off.
All right,
Yeah,
sweet. Well,
see,
welcome to the Unboxed
that's how this
Show.
goes.
All right, welcome to the Unboxed Show. This is Nick. I'm here with Eric. We've got a special guest on today, Pardees, Safizadeh, right?
Safizadeh.
Safizadeh. Oh,
Safizadeh.
I forgot to bring my guide. And we're excited. Pardees has joined us in one of our companies, Smashing Boxes, as a business development leader. She's based out of Boston. And we're having her on, hoping to talk about. She also, by way of background, a general sort of startup and entrepreneurial veteran for 10, 15 years. Has spent time in both the Triangle as well as Boston, and has gotten exposure and insight and experience in both markets. So I'm sort of hoping we can talk about what the startup ecosystem looks like comparatively from Boston to Raleigh Durham. Welcome, Pardees. Maybe if you don't mind, give us a few minutes on your sort of bio and background.
Sure. Hello. So as Nick was saying, I started my startup experience doing social media for startups, and I was actually at one of the startups that Nick was mentoring at the time at the Triangle Startup Factory way back in the day. And what I used to do is to grow social followings. I would use Facebook when Facebook was first a thing. I used to make Facebook groups for businesses and then basically have them do some sort of promotion across my affinity groups that I had. Then when Twitter came up, I did the same thing for Twitter. So I would make Twitter like um, followings for people and would try to like up their following to like 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, 5,000. And then when LinkedIn became a thing, I used to tweet at Twitter executives who were on Twitter and tell them they have to get on LinkedIn and do LinkedIn trainings for them. As I continued my social media journey, the only people that would really hire me full time were startup companies. So that's how I came into the startup space. And then I realized that followings were cool, but revenue was a lot better than that. So I started spending more of my time on trying to figure out at scale how to get people to actually sign up for something and pay for something. So then I worked at Cloudant, which was a database as a service company that was acquired by IBM. I was the digital marketing manager there and did a bunch of different ads and ways, the campaigns. That was my first time I was doing like real digital marketing campaigns back in the day in 2015. Then I went on to Cloud Health Technologies, which was later bought by VMware, and I was their first digital marketing manager. I got them from 5 leads a month to over 500 leads a month in the 2.5 years I was there, helped them hire an entire marketing team. Helped them manage the BDRs a little bit while I was there and kind of just like helped them figure out the go-to-market strategy through conferences, advertising, HubSpot email, all that kind of stuff. And then went to Evergage, where I was in customer success, and I got to work with different types of marketing teams because they were a marketing tech product. They later got bought by Salesforce, so I was the one in charge of helping out the B2B companies kind of figure out, how do we actually use website personalization to draw conversions for content downloads, and then how do we use those content downloads to continue nurturing someone across email, website, ads, whatever, so they can actually become a customer later. And then after that, I founded my own go-to-market agency called Albaloo, where I was helping startups figure out their go-to-market strategies, and then got joined up forces with 923 Studio, stayed there for a little while, helped them double their revenue in the year that I was there, and now I'm here smashing boxes. So that is me in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's a lot in a short, compact period of time. So, when did you realize that you have a unique background, just family and history and all that? When did you realize that or get the entrepreneurial bug? Let's say.
So when I was a kid, so I think it's because I was growing up as an immigrant family. I was the very first person from my family that was born in America. And back then, my dad didn't really understand like brand as a thing, so he wouldn't like let my sister and I buy like branded clothing items. So for me, it was just figuring out like ways that I could make money so I could buy like cool clothes from the Limited Two um, for my sister. So I started babysitting. I had like a little babysitting business. My sister was my first employee who I would hire and fire. depending on how I felt about her at that time of day.
Of
At
course.
that time of day, I was also riding horses for families that would buy horses that were too young for their kids to ride. And what I would do is I would ride the horses for the parents. So then when the kids got on the horse was too tired to buck them off or do anything off kilter. So then they could have a good lesson.
Um, so, and then what's your journey from to Raleigh to Boston? And so how'd you end up where you are today?
Yeah. So I worked at Mass Challenge. I think that was like one of the big turning points in my life was I got a job doing social media for a entrepreneurial group in Boston that their only thing was just promoting entrepreneurship in the Boston space because they were the only ones that would hire me to do social media at the time. Then that got me to Mass Challenge, which is a big competition. It's now a global competition, but it started out in Boston. And what they would do is that they would give out $1 million in prizes to startups, like no equity, no strings attached. And they would bring in 125 startups from around the world to Boston every single summer. One of those startups that was there, it was from Raleigh. And so they actually became one of my friends. We were the two youngest people there at that time. I was like 22, and I remember when I met that founder, like he and I both looked at each other. We're like, we're both the youngest people here. So we became friends based on that. And then I ended up doing social media for them and helping them out with a Kickstarter group as well. And then all their friends needed help because they were part of the NC State entrepreneurship program when it first came out in like 2010. They were like in the arts entrepreneurship program. And there was one investor who invested in a bunch of those startups and they all needed the same help. So they brought me down there to kind of help them out. And that's when I came to Raleigh, and it was fun. It was cheaper than Boston, which was really nice. The food was a lot better. I like the southern food and the ribs, so that was really great. And I ended up staying down there and working with a few startups down there. Coursework being, which became Trinket, being one of them. And then that's how I got plugged in down here.
And then, so tell everyone about Mass Challenge. They're an interesting group, and I don't know if there's an equivalent really in the Raleigh area, or would you say there is?
I don't think there's an equivalent to them in the world because now they're everywhere. They have like a Sweden program, they have an Israel program. They have a lot of different affinity groups, but what they specialize in is bringing startups through this accelerator. And the main differentiator is that you can just be an idea on a napkin all the way up to like a very like a bigger kind of startup that's out there. And so they bring them in, they take them through programming. I went through the whole program because I was live tweeting the program when I was there too. And it was really nice because they bring in like huge entrepreneurs. Like they brought in the founder of Vertex Pharmaceuticals when I was there. And a lot of like really prolific investors. And it gives you a really nice network that you're not really able to build on your own that quickly as an entrepreneur. I think that's like the main thing is giving you that network and that training. And it's like the only like real like entrepreneurial college that I've been through that kind of takes you through that without getting an MBA program.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by those programs, and I think a lot of people then say, "Is that an incubator, an accelerator? What is it really?"
Yeah, I think it's more of an accelerator because they don't change your idea per se. I mean, you can introduce you to mentors who can help you kind of find your way, but they're not an incubator in the fact that they come in and they help you like build an idea hands-on, one-on-one. They give you the groups and they give you access to the people that can help you build that startup out. That's why I call it more of an accelerator because it just accelerates your momentum versus actually like building out a new idea for you and with you.
Are they taking equity positions, or is it all
They
non-dilutive?
don't take equity.
Okay.
No.
Who is the owner
Yeah,
of Mass Challenge? Is that Massachusetts University, Boston Mass General? I guess who is
it's a
the?
bunch of public and private partnerships is the way that it works. I haven't been with them in like when I was with them it was like 10 years ago. Right? So they probably changed the way that they do it. But they used to have people kind of like give money in some way that was like equity and dilution free, and they were a nonprofit when I was working there. So they weren't even like a for-profit company. And so as part of their operating budget was the money that they gave away to the startups who won. And only the top 10 stars would get the prizes. Everyone else would just get the programming. And then there would be like a huge event afterwards, and they would announce the top 10 winners.
What's the population of Boston?
I don't know.
I can look
I
that
can
up.
look it up.
Yeah. I'm just, I mean, $1 million is a big I mean, that's a big commitment. That's like some group saying we really want
Yeah.
to see startup and entrepreneurial activity happen, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is. It sounds like it was also mostly locally homegrown, between
Hmm.
municipality, like you said, public, and then also private companies, donors, investors, whatever, because they saw the upside for that. You know,
Yeah.
I want to search my memory banks for equivalents here, but some examples come to mind are almost laughable where we brought in, I think, Google did some sort of accelerator, but it was like a week long program, and the winner of the pitch got 5 grand. So it was
Right.
not locally, it wasn't homegrown. We like,
Hmm.
recruited Google to come in here to do some cool stuff. I mean, I think obviously the knowledge is invaluable when you can work with really smart people, so like that's great, but also 5 grand. So we outsourced it, and the prize was 5K. Like, what a piece of shit, honestly. But $1 million. I mean, like someone popping down 1 million is like
But
we have
it would be a
fun.
million across like 10 companies or like 20 companies. So some
Yeah.
people only get 10,000, some people get 20. So there was like a couple like I think the top winners would get 100,000
Oh, but
that comes in,
I mean, that's a
which
that's
is
a
still
lot.
something.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
we've
it's still something.
I guess our area has NC Idea, which is a nonprofit, which
Yeah.
has evolved, ultimately for the better to be much more statewide. It used to fund primarily kind of like tech startups. It was almost like a pipeline tool, and they gave out, I think it was like 700K a year, like two different cycles of 50K grants to 7 winners, something like that. It's like I said, it's evolved. They've raised more money. They spread it out. They have seed grants of 5K. They look at rural parts of North Carolina. They look at all kinds of different community-based businesses. It's definitely no longer just a tech startup pipeline. But that was always a good start.
Right.
Did you find the info on how big is Boston? I'm just relative,
I
like,
did. Yeah,
yeah.
so Boston proper is 650,000 people, but then the greater Boston area is 4.3 million people.
Okay, that's a good
But we
number.
actually lost the most. It's like the interesting thing about Boston is that we were like the number one state where people, or Massachusetts was the number one state where people moved away from during COVID.
Oh,
So we've kind of been emptied out a little bit.
oh dang. Well,
I
because what's
didn't
the
know
the
that.
Greater
Yeah.
Triangle at this point is probably 2 mil, a
About two
little over.
million.
Okay,
Yeah.
so half the size of Boston, but we don't have someone putting up half the money, for a similar, likewise
That's
challenge.
a good point. So why is that? What's happening around here? And maybe we don't have to dive into that now. I really want to dig into what.
Before we go
Yeah.
further, I love the babysitting business. I'm kind of going, I'm living that firsthand with my kids. My oldest got a $25 gift card, and he gave it to his two little brothers so they could buy an ice machine. And so now he's an investor in their icy
Oh,
business.
nice.
So they're the operators, and he just
That's
gets
great.
20% equity or something, and he's pushing them to launch and sell ices at the pool because he wants his profit share. Uh, hire each other, like who's in charge, like you're fired, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out. So fun lessons in business, and it paid off for you. So that's great. That's a great story to have heard. The horse business sounds like actually like a real,
Yeah.
you were
The horse
growing.
business is great.
Yeah, yeah, that's like actually like a real need. Like you could have scaled that venture, at an early age.
Probably.
First exit.
Yeah, probably could have. It's just horse people are very hard to work with sometimes. It's like I've never been looked down upon more as when I was like working at a stable, which
Oh,
was crazy. So it
wow.
wasn't really my jam all the way. Yeah.
Oh, JK. Well, you should just doubled your prices then. Be like, okay,
Right.
I
yeah.
Yeah.
probably, yeah, I was getting paid $100 an hour in high school. So back then I thought I was really making it, which it was. It
That
wasn't bad.
Just
is.
literally really making
Yeah,
it.
that's
Yeah,
impressive.
that's really making it. You didn't think you were really making it. You were really making it. All right. Well,
Yeah, that was fun.
the LeBron James of
Uh,
small business
yeah. There you go.
entrepreneurship
Teenagers.
in high school.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Teens these days.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, switching back to what
Yeah.
you wanted to say, Eric. And is this
I,
autos doing that? I think I saw that like switch to one and now to two. Is this happening?
no.
I just saw it. Like, oh, you're doing it with your phone.
Yeah.
Oh, with the
I can do it
computer.
on the
Okay.
computer.
Yeah.
Um.
Magic buttons.
Yeah. What got you back to Boston? And then let's talk about the Boston. Boston entrepreneurialism. What's going on there? What's exciting? What industries? And how I want to really talk about how agency businesses fit into an area like Boston. where there is a lot more
Sure.
activity, a lot more money running around?
Yeah, so what brought me back to Boston? So I accidentally went viral when I was there, but being a woman in tech. So what happened was that I went to a bunch of conferences with Trinket at the time. It was like 3 or 4 conferences within 6 weeks. And I had like a lot of like weird interactions with men when I was there. So I talked about it with a lot of people. I ended up writing a blog post about it. One of my friends put that blog post on Hacker News and it kind of blew up on Hacker News. And I ended up getting a Business Insider article written about me. If you Google me, you will find it, where I stopped a man at a hackathon when I was 22 years old. And that was written when I was about 25 at the time. So after that happened, I lost my job and I was trying to figure out what to do next. And so I just went to my network and just was like, hey, I went viral. This thing happened. Can someone please find me a job? These are the things I'm good at. Help. And one of my friends who I met at that hackathon where I slapped a guy ended up helping me get a job at IBM and brought me back to Boston. So that's how I kind of moved back over there. Um, it was interesting. But back then, that was the very first digital marketing role I had seen, and the people hiring for it had never seen that role either. So like I remember I was talking to the VP of marketing at Cloudent, and he just like went through like every single part of that job, and he was like, "Can you do Twitter? Can you do Facebook? Can you do CRM?" And I would be like, "Yes, yes," like a little bit, not really. Like I never worked in like HubSpot before. That's okay. I can learn it. And so he was like, "Well, you're the person that we see that would work the best with this job because no one's ever done like full digital before at IBM either. So why don't you just come here and join the job?" So that's what kind of brought me back. I love Boston. Boston's like huge with the businesses here. So we have HubSpot that did pretty well here. They were like their stock like really up during COVID. We have a lot of good MarTech companies that kind of came up through HubSpot because of that. We also have like Acquia. We have a very good like cybersecurity network here. We have Rapid7 who's getting really big. Um, Anything in like high tech, we do really well in. And then also for life sciences, Boston was just named as one of the top like capitals for the US for life sciences. So we're actually building a lot of labs here now to come in. And then for AI, there's like a whole group in Massachusetts called like Massachusetts for AI, and they're like working on like workforce development and becoming like the head of AI for the country right now too.
I think every area is trying to be the head of AI for something.
But we have a
That's
working group that's just dedicated towards it, which is really interesting.
there's a uh, pretty active working group in South Carolina of all places. Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah, like it was like appointed, I think, under their governor too, for
Yep.
AI, and we know them for blockchain stuff because they started with blockchain like everybody, and then kind of still do that, but migrate over to AI. And they're
Hmm.
pretty active in South Carolina and now in North Carolina too. But I feel like that's everywhere. But somebody's got to win.
Yeah. Someone's got to win. But I will bet on Boston more than anyone else because we just have this like huge ecosystem of these like huge companies that bring these people
Yeah.
in that like wouldn't be anywhere else. I saw sometimes some of my North Carolina mentors, I see them flying through Boston because they're here for a conference or they're here for a meeting or they're here for speaking. So it's like one of the places where you can accidentally meet someone who just happens to be passing through where I don't see like that large of conferences in North Carolina quite yet, bringing everyone through like for almost no reason. It just happens to be like a big meeting or a
Somebody's
big
got to
conference
start it.
there. Someone's
Somebody's
gonna do
got to
it.
start
I know.
it. Let's do it.
Yeah, for sure.
A strong
Yeah.
license presence, and I was kind of looking this up, and it didn't drill down too far. But both markets raised somewhere in like the between $1 and $2 billion of venture capital in 2023. North Carolina or Raleigh Durham might have actually had more in 2022 due to like a $2 billion raise by the
Probably.
but when you look at the top funders, at least here they're primarily, if it's not Epic Games, it's primarily life science. And Boston is the same, and so that's really cool. I think the two markets share a lot of success, and I know, yeah, if Boston's won, the Raleigh Durham market's got to be top five or kind of close behind. They've got a lot of life science, but you just don't see a lot of startups there. I mean, that's innovation that's happening in a lab or at a university,
Hmm.
drug development, inside of a pharmaceutical company that's going to spin out. I've never found that to be like analogous to any sort of typical entrepreneurial journey. So what about the startup, like the tech startup scene there, independent of life sciences? And you kind of spoke to it a bit, but I do think in that regard, the Raleigh Durham area is behind in terms of, yeah, ecosystem funding, events, and I want to kind of hear about how they let's talk about how they compare, because I'd love for us to kind of come away from this conversation with like what are some inspirations, and for us to create pathways to continue to elevate ourselves by looking at other markets that are leaders in that position.
Yeah, so the other big thing about Boston is that there's like so many ecosystem players that are just dedicated to the ecosystem too. Like we have like Mass Tech Leadership Council, they're a nonprofit. Their only like mission is to help other startups grow in the area, getting them education, giving them access to connections, giving them, and they have a whole board of people that are both in publicly funded companies and like very large startups that can help out these younger startups come out. And then we also have one version of that through the government itself too, called Mass Collaborative. And they're all about like finding early stage startups and kind of bringing them in and helping them grow. And so that's like the things that I think are kind of missing in North Carolina is like that group of people that like isn't really affiliated with the tech scene, but they are affiliated with the tech scene, and like they're only helping people grow and find connections. I think CED kind of does that. I think that's like the most relevant one that's kind of there. And Grep like kind of starting to do that too, but kind of like bringing that all together under like multiple roofs of like helping people. And also for Boston, like we have so many people whose only like business is coming up with lists of events to go to because we just have so many events going on in Boston for the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And they're all well attended, which is like so crazy to see. So like I volunteer at Venture Cafe. It's a weekly meetup for innovators, investors, entrepreneurs, anyone who's kind of interested in the innovation economy to come together and come up with ideas. And every single week we have a different theme that comes out. And every week we have like 300 to 500 people at just one event. And then there's also multiple events happening in the city at the same time, and they're also getting, 50 to 100 people at these events too. And Raleigh Durham is like a little bit quieter. Like when I come here, like I don't have a spreadsheet of like 20 events I can come to like anytime that's happening here.
And can you, I mean, sort of give us an example, or do you have like what companies have come out of all these things? And I know you mentioned there's some company names, and I don't expect you to like have an encyclopedia of all the companies that have come out of there, but to differentiate like what's just doing activity for the sake of activity and everyone gets to feel good about themselves versus like true like success stories where it's like, man, I got my start because of this ecosystem and now I've IPO'd and I'm
Yeah.
a
I mean,
company.
HubSpot came through that whole ecosystem. So HubSpot was at Cambridge Innovation Center. Their founders used to be hanging out at some of these events, and then they became big, um, like through the ecosystem as a whole, pretty much. They're like our number one, I guess, like the Pendo of Boston is HubSpot, basically. And so that's why I'm like really excited for Pendo in North Carolina to finally IPO too, because I feel like that's going to cause a lot of like ripple effects across everything. Because right now, everyone is there, they're just working, and they don't have that like big exit quite yet. That would like then cause like ripple effects of a bunch of startups to go and like find new startups and the engineers to like find new things to do after that. Like things are all just kind of like locked up and waiting right now. Most of the engineers I know in Raleigh Durham are all working at Pendo right now. And so I'm just waiting for it to kind of like release some. And then that's what happened at HubSpot with the MarTech, the whole like MarTech space. It was like HubSpot then became a big thing. Then there was another company called Tetra that's like doing pretty well. They were founded by ex-HubSpot people. We have a lot of ex-HubSpot startups that are out there right now with like Series A, Series B doing really well out there. And it was because they came to HubSpot, they were able to get some money there. They IPO'd, they were able to like be on that rocket ship path, and now you're getting like a bunch of entrepreneurial founders who have experience who are ready to start the next big thing. And I think like that's the main thing. In Raleigh, I noticed is that it's a lot slower for like, the funding rounds are a little bit slower, the IPOs are a little bit slower. So that whole like cycle of someone getting the funding coming up and then IPOing or exiting or doing something, and then taking those ripple effects and starting new companies is like a little bit of a slower cycle than we have in Boston right now.
Is there a second and third that come to your mind? You mentioned one, Petra.
Yeah, like Rapid Seven's really big. I'm not sure if they actually were able to IPO quite yet, but a lot of people went through there and they were able to start new companies after that. Oh, there's another one too, Endeca. Endeca is huge. Endeca was so big that someone has made like a family tree of all the Endeca startups that came out after that.
Oh, wow.
And we also have the PayPal mafia, is what we call them. They're going around because there was one company in Boston that was fun, but that was acquired by PayPal, and then they brought in a bunch of PayPal people, and now they're going off and making up their own PayPal funded groups.
Yeah, I have two thoughts, and I think Eric's itching to say something. But one is, back in Indianapolis, where I was kind of spent my years 0 through 18, nothing much was going on. It was a sports kind of town, just like a typical second tier Midwest city. But, as tech sort of came on the rise as an industry, they had one company, I think it was Exact Target, that sold to either Salesforce first
They sold to
or
Salesforce.
Okay, yeah. And then Atlanta had the guy that sold to Pardot, or he had Pardot.
Pardot, yeah.
Yeah, Pardot, yeah, they sold to Salesforce too.
Exact Target sold to Salesforce, and now there's like a thriving entrepreneurial scene because people are starting incubators, investment firms, co-working spaces. They just realize that there's so much magic and power in startups, and they have money. Some of these people are exited, and they're
Yeah.
like, Exact Target. Just like some people's resume just says ex Uber, and you're like, okay, you're rich, I guess is what that means. Thank you, humble brag, but or the flex, but
Yeah.
we don't need that here. That's a great point, and I think having at least one could really go a long way. The other thing I was going to say, well, actually, is now multiple thoughts. So sorry for hogging the airspace, but sometimes I feel like does our market in like the Raleigh-Durham area still have kind of the energy and the stamina to keep investing? Like Boston, it would have been easy to say, oh, we got to sell a HubSpot, there's a lot of, or Paycom, we're good, it's going. But that's not the case. They're still pumping money and resources, and they still want to keep that going forevermore. And like you said, we've got CED, but they've got one big conference and then a few, quasi. It's a great group, but they're, 6 people, 8 people, somewhere in that range, so it means they're not, and they don't dish out cash, so it's like not that well funded. But who else is really saying, even though things are going great here overall, like the local economy is strong and we're a good place to live and we win these like best places in business or whatever nationally, but I feel like people have gotten a little apathetic and they're not continuing to pour money into what could be, a thriving startup ecosystem. And if we don't, then we're just not going to go as far as fast as other markets will. You have a thought on that, Eric?
No.
Okay.
No.
Sad.
But I think it's just total agreement.
Yeah.
I was just looking though at a couple Boston companies. So Klaviyo,
That's a good one.
Klaviyo, yeah, from HubSpot.
so they're former HubSpot. Is that true? Yeah, that makes sense. And they've been growing big, right? They do a lot of B2C email marketing, like very heavy on that transactional.
Yeah.
And then Toast.
Oh,
So
yeah.
just a little different industry, but
That's
hospitality software.
Yeah. We also have Easy Cater too in the hospitality space in Boston too.
That's interesting.
Maybe like catering.
Projects, and it's like, oh, is any company I've heard of? And it's like, no.
No.
Yeah, but there it's like HubSpot, use them, Klaviyo,
Use
them,
them.
Toast. Use them. We check out and buy stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Mostly healthy things, kombucha and otherwise. Just kidding. Kind of the segue from the, are we going to continue to invest and see more? We want more. I'm interested in both of you guys' thoughts on, is the best outcome an IPO? A venture capitalist isn't going to say yes to that because it's a maybe, but for the market, is it the best?
Well, it's IPOs bring the most national attention, even more so than exits, especially today. There aren't as many IPOs. But ultimately, you just need big exits because you need some of the people who have small amount of equity, who aren't the leadership of the startup, to leave the nest and take their learnings into their own ideas with a little bit of capital behind them. And that's basically how, like the PayPal Mafia is the most well-known one, but there's actually a bunch of those And like you're seeing in HubSpot, a lot of those, alumni, they move into other areas. And then you see with HubSpot too is an interesting company because they're getting heavily into AI. And so my guess
Hmm.
is you're going to start some of the AI startups that become successful will actually also be HubSpot graduates, let's call them, just because of how much they're investing in AI, and it's practical AI. Um, but yeah, I think IPOs for national attention for sure, but ultimately just any form, any liquidity event that could get, that layer of early, middle to senior managers some cash to go ahead and take their thoughts and bring startups to the local market. And that's the
Yeah.
thing. We're just Boston, of course, has had a lot of those. They have. We have not, but I think we're on the cusp. We're right there.
If I had a magic wand, I'd love to see Pindo's cap table to see like who makes not names, but how many people make over a certain amount when that liquidity event happens. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of assumptions on what's the liquidity event, what are the terms, but if they IPO, how many people are now millionaires or
Hmm.
decade millionaires, or is it 100K a pop? Because rounds, down rounds, options, underwater, whatever, vesting, there's a lot that goes into it, and it's usually got to be a big pop for everyone to get, to get paid. Um, so I'm curious as to how that's going to. Are they going to IPO? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Pardees, what are you hearing?
I want them to IPO
You think
because
they're
I
going
think
to?
that'd be a really great win for Raleigh. I mean, I don't know where else it would go after all the
So
money they've raised.
yeah, I mean, I've heard a number of rumors, especially recently. It's the ebb and flow of the market for them, and right now they're in a slow period. I think they've not done as
Mm,
well. Not that they're not doing well, but their growth has slowed. Let's say, which doesn't mean anything specifically that. But I have heard rumors of acquisition, so exit. Um, but I think like not too long ago, maybe even like 18 to 24 months, I thought they were on a track to IPO. I thought that was like
Well,
a
the
kind of
whole
a known
market
thing.
stalled. IPOs, I think, isn't. I mean, I think all venture capitalists are waiting for the IPO market to sort of loosen up.
Yeah,
come back.
I
Capital.
IPOs are certainly very slow. I think they'll be back in vogue though here pretty soon. I think that's also natural cycles of capital. But there have been rumors of acquisition, and I'm really, just I don't want to say I'm making things up. These are kind of known out there rumors, um, but I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I think they're just at that point in their cycle where it's just they've got to. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a little unfair because HubSpot is so kind of, well, it's not really B2C, it's B2B, but it's very SaaS and solopreneur. Like anyone can just kind of get in there and start using it. Toast people use all the time, at least as a customer. Pindo is much more of a corporate B2B offering.
Right.
You need integration, you need a dev team to like put that stuff on your site. You need to like know how you're using it. So it's kind of we have less exposure to, is it a good product, is it a good company, do people use it? I know that I don't really have many. I don't know many companies that use it, but it doesn't mean they don't have thousands of clients. But it's just because it's sort of, you got to be at a different like scale. You're not, most startups can't use it. It's too expensive.
Yeah,
It's too
it is.
too much. It's too big of a product.
well, let me ask you this. I just want to put one more company in our area that's well known, private, large, SaaS,
Yeah.
and I, they must have also an alumni tree that could be pretty big if there is ever a thought of selling, which that has been rumored for many, many years. There's been one company in particular, but I think now IPO is the thing that's going on with them,
That'd be great.
and so
Do
that
the staff have equity? I mean, they've been so privately held for so
I
long.
know
Is that
that's
even in vogue to issue options or shares, or what would you even call it? If that, I mean,
I have to assume that they have, a large, network of, on the leadership, downstream one or two branches that have some options or
Yep.
some equity into. I have to believe, and I have to believe it's pretty.
Well, senior
I
leadership's getting ready to age out. They need to think of a transition plan.
I think they're
You
going
know,
IPO.
yeah, I'd love that. That'd be great.
I think that's a thing. I
If
think
you could get
that's
$2 billion IPOs in sort of a short window,
I think that changes the game
That
around
would
here.
change a lot.
yeah. Except how many like cool young engineers are working at SAS that would go off and do fun things versus it's kind of like the old guard of
That's right.
technology. What's it even? I mean, it
But
doesn't
how
matter.
many of them may give money though? You
That's
know,
right.
like you don't have to go build something, but they could become investors, they could become more engaged, they could have
I,
more
And
time.
then, yeah, and then the third one that's like somewhat of from a terms of old guard to new guard, there's like a hybrid because Epic is kind of a traditional company in a very non-traditional industry, gaming. I mean, not that they're non-traditional, but it's like you get a lot of young, creative engineers. Those Epic engineers, they already make a ton of money. They're salaried at a ton of money. Um,
gaming, metaverses.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they also, they have hit kind of rougher market conditions and are dealing with lawsuits and all sorts of stuff. But, inevitably something will happen there as well. And I don't know if they have interest in like IPO.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, but my guess is that uh, Sony or somebody inevitably makes them an offer they can't refuse.
Yeah, those are two great examples. I mean, SaaS, obviously, I don't know the product that well because, again, it's a pretty, heavy duty corporate enterprise product or suite of products, but it's been consistently one of the best places to work. Massive wealth creation engine. The founders are usually in the top three. They're one, two, and three, or one and two. There's two of them, but in wealthiest people in the state. So they're and it's been around for 20 plus years at least. Is that something like that? Epic, everyone can go on and play Fortnite. They can play these games, and whether the business is crushing it or sales are down is sort of indifferent. They've got a great product and a massive amount of market share, and a ton of users, and so you could the price or the value, the share value, sure, that's kind of subjective or could be debated, but that goes back to Pendo. Like, I don't know that many people that use a product, and it sort of came on late and kind of was a rising star. But like, do they have like sort of the staying power to just to be a operating business all the way through IPO? And then if they do get acquired, that's sort of where I was kind of setting that up for it. Is there like there's got to be certain terms where all those people who are paper millionaires at some IPO price are they wiped out in an acquisition because of preferences and other kind of terms and valuation?
I don't think that's typically the case.
Yeah.
I think if there's an acquisition of Pendo, you're going to see a lot of people with a good cash out
Okay.
from that.
So there's no, I mean, yeah, I'm not trying to play
Yeah.
Doomsday or Chicken Little, but like, if it goes from, it's not an IPO to it's something else, would that just, I mean, we don't want some
Well,
big,
well, look, let's look
dragon
at
on the,
we've got Red Hat. So Red Hat, Raleigh company, acquired by IBM.
Hmm.
How many Red Hat? I mean, they were pretty big at the time. I don't remember the value of that acquisition, but it was big enough.
billions, I think.
Yeah, it was
One or
billions.
two or something.
How many Red Hat? And where's the Red Hat mafia?
Yeah.
I don't know if that exists.
Some of them made money early on, and I'm not sure how they got taken out, but I know they've raised very few rounds of funding. I think they raised $50 million, kind of just almost to just prep for the acquisition.
Hmm.
But I don't. But that was so far in the game that I think all the earlier people. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if they were able to be bought out internally, but I mean I know there's some early folks that did okay, but yeah, it's not like they're still working.
Yeah, they're all- yeah.
So okay.
Okay,
Good.
I just change gears real quick. I'm curious, Pardees, what do you know about how the university system in Boston works with the entrepreneurial community? Because one thing around here is we do have a very we have a number of large, very well known universities, and we're in a pretty in a small compact area. I think one of the things that Boston is
Hmm.
going for generally, and why meetups are successful, is because Boston as a city is very accessible. It's very easy to get out of work, and get to a meetup, whereas here it's everything's spread out. Or our university system here is pretty compact considering the size and scope of three large ones amongst some other very active community college system. But what's it like up there? What do you know about that?
Yeah, so I would say compared to the North Carolina ones, the Boston universities are catching up entrepreneurially. And I think that's almost because there's like so many enterprise companies in Boston that they used to just prep you to go join the Big Four. Like I went to Boston College, and the business school at Boston College was just about going corporate. So I didn't go to the business school there. 'Cause I was like, why would I want to do that? But like now we have Northeastern. Northeastern just started its own fund for alumni and students. Boston College has its own fund now too but it's like very nascent. Like they're just starting out right now. Whereas like MC Idea, like in 2010, they were already doing like like University of North Carolina, like no, sorry, NC State. They were already doing like startup competitions back then and funding them and giving them money and getting them there. And when I was like all my friends from NC State are my age, and they were all winners of the entrepreneurship games over there, what they call the E games. Whereas in Boston College, we just started doing that. I'm actually a mentor for both the pitch competition and for the summer accelerator that they now run. And finally, there was one student I finally saw, and she was in the pitch competition and she's now in the accelerator. I'm just like, okay, finally, we made it. Like, we're starting to get that pipeline kind of moving through BC. Even though from Boston College, we have had some really good exits. Like, we just had Drizzly, they were bought by Uber. Those were Boston College kids. And I think like that's what's starting us to like come in more, and we're now starting to invest more in our own startups. Um, Northeastern is the other really big powerhouse for entrepreneurship right now. And they have they now have an angel group that invests, but the students run themselves, and the students are now investing in their own students and alumni startups too. But I think like we're getting there. For most of the events I go to, there's very little students there. They're like in their own like little student entrepreneurship events, and they don't really come out into the city too much with the like adults, quote unquote, I would say. Whereas for when I'm down in North Carolina, I do see like a few more students coming out, and I do see the colleges like at least engaging. Like they were all there at the Grepapalooza, which was really nice to see. In Boston, you wouldn't really see that as often.
So, Nick, I'd ask you, like, how do you see how, just to make a comparator, do you agree, like, with Pardees that we have a pretty vibrant university and entrepreneurial overlap, and the university system is,
Yeah.
pretty active?
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't know enough about some of these other markets, but the Triangle has been an identified kind of brand or entity since like the 70s. They started Research Triangle Park. We've got these three universities: NC State, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Duke. That have made up a ton of research and academia and a lot of intellectual property and a lot of intellectual capital. It's kind of been a part of this area's identity for, yeah, like I said, quite a long time. Um, Eventually, well, yes, obviously, with all that, we're not the Silicon Valley of the U.S. The Silicon Valley is, and still is. Well, yeah, they were the first. Boston was up there, and I think it was Silicon Alley or something at one point. But now people are like, "Oh, screw it, we don't need to keep trying to make it like,
Yeah.
a riff off of Callie's deal. Let's be our own identity." But so in some ways, our ecosystem did not come on as fast and is not as large and vibrant and thriving as some of these bigger markets. But I think the university scene has always been, or they have always been like anchors to kind of our market. And a couple, like I think $2 billion of federal funds flow through here from grants on an annual basis. Some of the lion's share of that goes to the universities. We do have a large set of NGOs as well. So yeah, I think I think I think I'm sure we've done a good job. I think kind of the university piece is always a little tricky because they have different. Each university has themselves in mind, and they kind of like a multiple like bottom line sort of thing. Sometimes it's like to support things at our university, and it's to I want to recruit the best students, or I'm going to fund this just so that I can kind of recruit better PhD candidates to work in my labs, and it's not just about growth or scale or ultimate success. It's about making my brand as UNC better. So I firsthand, I think yeah, it's going well, but I don't know. Universities alone aren't going to create a vibrant startup ecosystem.
Yeah. So I see it the same
They're
way.
a big player,
Yeah,
but
they're a
yeah,
big player. How well that translates into a substantial entrepreneurial ecosystem and lots of companies and exits. Maybe we're to be determined still.
or it's long tail because it's at least
Yeah,
getting these kids
exactly.
exposure to it. They're doing something. They're starting it. They're failing it. Some of them are going okay, and now they're ready for startups as a career. Whether they're the entrepreneur or they're bouncing around to different startups, but getting them ready for that. Obviously, in my day 20 years ago, like yeah, it was all corporate. It's like, hey, here's who's coming to campus this month. It's corporate this, corporate that, banking this, consulting that. There was no really notion of what is a startup or how do you work at a startup. So now that that's available, we're just going to have more people with a baseline of exposure. We are retaining a lot more people in this market who come to school here and want to stay. So that's big. Our RTP is sort of gone up and down with different industries. We had a big telecom presence, and telecom busted, and so RTP was pretty empty. Now we're growing a life science presence, but if you're not a scientist, do you leave? But now that we've grown more in the tech side, you're seeing a lot more people kind of stay in market, which is good to make sure we've got the intellectual capital for
Sure.
that's a good ingredient for startup success.
So before we, I want to kind of transition a little bit. Before we do so, we keep bringing up the Research Triangle Park, and I think that's extremely relevant to this entire conversation. Historically, and we can get into like how it all gets started and all that, but it's been highly focused on the enterprise, the big like sprawling campuses for big companies like IBM and Cisco and all that. And over the past few years, they've really started their kind of next phase or their master plan to whatever you want to call it. And it is truly all about creating a highly entrepreneurial environment that's kind of mixes in with still some of those big campuses. There was, and then some other examples to cater to those people, like the thought of residential in this Research Triangle Park corridor was never a thing. Now there's tons of apartments and townhomes going up. There's tons of retail, and it's all driven on the idea that they want to invest into entrepreneurs and potential entrepreneurs. So, how do you think that changes this area?
Sure. Well, for starters, we are kind of I don't know the right sort of city planner word, but we're like a driving community. It's like a driving state. Like there's an intentional green space instead of density off of highways. We were built, I think, to be a nice work, a great place to raise a family, or a nice live, work, play kind of balance. So there's just not a lot of overlap and density between downtowns and work centers and residents and amenities and retail. So the more we see that come together, the better. Between Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, they're still just physically so spread out that it's not going to be one major metropolitan or metropolis. Like, oh gosh, it's going to get built up to the touching. So you're still going to have to find your zones. I think RTP is great because it's maybe one of our biggest opportunities for growth and success. As Pardees has talked about some of the Boston examples. I mean, RTP has a full organization. It has a full foundation. They've got a lot of resources. It was, kind of a master plan of, the municipalities, public, private, to really, shine a spotlight on our area. And it was forward looking in the 70s. It was like, oh, let's pre-make a huge campus close to different, residential areas, close to the airport, and it's a big part of why we are where we are. If that can actually be modernized, I think it could be a great asset for the Triangle.
Uh, so, Parties, you keep shaking your head. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's really exciting. If there's a way to have like different groups of people have different events and have more people like even if they like live closer to each other, if there's like a little bit of apartments and like everyone work like living in these apartments is like I want to be an entrepreneur one day. at least then it's bringing people together in some way, shape, or form. That like after their jobs, grab a drink together, or if you like you just bump into people when you're out. And you can be like, oh, I keep seeing you at this event. Like, let's actually become friends and talk about what we're interested in. And like, oh, we're both interested in startups. It's like that serendipity kind of needs to be there. And I'm noticing it with RTP more and more. Like, there's more bigger breweries, at least like even like on a social aspect, there's more events socially that are happening, so you're more likely to bump into people. And unlike Boston, people actually talk to each other here when they're like just out and about anything random that comes to their mind. So it's interesting. If they actually do a big push to like bring people down, I mean, people are already coming down here. If you do a big entrepreneurial push, I'm sure you'll find people that are interested in starting companies together and like getting that like bubbling ecosystem more bubbly, so to speak.
Ironically, I don't ever really. This never crosses my mind, but I think I live 1 mile from the entrance of RTP, kind of like on the southwest corner, and that's where the Frontier, or is it? No, not Frontier. Was it Frontier?
Frontier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've got a big space unused that
Okay.
they've turned into kind of open flex space. And it might maybe it's like a point 1.5 miles, but I'm so close to that, and I'm never there. I instead drive or bike 13 miles to come downtown. But just because there's spread out little pockets doesn't mean that's not like okay. I mean, I'm sure even San Francisco or Boston. Well, Boston is such a nice walkable city, but San Francisco
It
is
is
huge.
We're
There's
too.
just
so many pockets.
tiny.
You're out here in
Yeah.
San Jose or San Hill Road or this part of the
Yeah.
orifice, whatever. There's not like one strip of bars and restaurants where you go to intermingle with other startup people. There's multiple, and I think the same is okay to be true here. I wish we had more mass transit. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Well, I think that's this going back to my thought on why a lot of the meetups do so much better in a place like Boston. It is because they're so accessible. They're easy. I know I've had many times over the 20 years I've been here where there's something going on and that morning I wake up and I can't wait to go to it after work or whatever. And then by 3 o'clock, I'm like, don't
There's no
feel
way I'm
like
driving
I just
30
not
minutes
driving
to
down
that.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I'm
right.
just not dealing with it. However, sure, if I could hop on some mass transit,
Yeah.
and just go right down the road,
Answer
walk.
some emails
Yeah,
while riding on a train.
yeah. There's no
Yeah.
question I would have ended up showing up at those things.
Yeah,
Or if
that's
there
right.
was just somewhere to work and you're like, I'll just work from there today.
Well, and like living in
And
New
then you
York,
just go after.
distance, the physical distance, it was shorter than like here downtown Durham to downtown Raleigh, but like the commute time is the same, if not more.
But
Like
it's
get on,
it's
walk
it's
to the
easy.
stop, get there, but it's doing something. It's
Yeah,
active,
it's
you
active.
know.
It's just it doesn't feel
Yeah,
stressful,
you don't
even though
mind
it's a
being like, I'm
pain.
gonna go take 45 minutes to get from here to some other place for a meeting or for a meetup, or we're getting drinks over here, and then now we're all the way across town. That's gonna take another 45 minutes between bus, subway, transfers.
Hmm.
Or I'm going to wait 20 minutes trying to get a cab, or I'm going to walk through masses of people, in Central Park, and it's going to take me 45 minutes. I mean, shit takes 45 minutes there. It's like not uncommon, even though you do have mass transit,
Right.
and it's 9 miles by 3 miles or whatever that is. So if it could just be easier and more of a, yeah. So anyway, that's dreams.
We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. I guess we don't have to keep you know hammering on this market or Boston, but what are I guess Pardees, if you had a few things you'd like to see for both, since you're the only one of the three of us that's got kind of good intimate experience with both markets, but from a startup ecosystem perspective, what are a couple things you'd like to see in the Triangle area that you've seen in Boston that you'd like to improve, and then the opposite, what would you like to see in Boston that you've maybe gathered from the Triangle that you'd like to see?
Oh, fun. So in the triangle, I just want more events that are happening and like more things for people. That's what I'm excited about hosting events down in the Durham Bottle Company because then we could be like, hey, come here. We already have some people working here. Come and co-work with us for the day and then talk to us afterwards about what you're working on. And just like bringing that together can like grow like exponentially. In Boston, we started the Tech Walk which is really fun. And we started it like 9 months ago. We're about to have our ninth one later this month. And at first, it was only 8 of us that were doing it. In the summer, I did a big push in April, and we got like 100 people registered. Now our list is like 230 people, and we got 60 people to register for the Tech Walk that's happening in like 3 weeks in like 4 days. And it's just interesting, like how that happens, and you know, like people are like now inviting their friends and like, oh, come to this thing. It's really cool. It's different. It's not really happening anywhere else. Like, let's all go for a walk and talk about tech. And I'm now calling it the tech parade because hopefully it's getting bigger and bigger, and it's hard to cross the streets now without any having closures or anything. Um, Over in Boston, I just wish people could be like a little bit more open to each other, like they are down here at RTP. And like the university, like getting the universities more involved would be really nice too. Because like it was so interesting for me to go to Griffapalooza and actually see like every college and university had their own table there, and they were talking about commercialization, they're talking about entrepreneurship, they're talking about all the different things that they're doing. We had like a similar event to Griffapalooza, and we only had MIT there. And that was it. Like no one else sponsored, no one else came, and there's so many universities there that could have been doing it. And we don't even have commercialization like strategies at these universities quite yet. So like seeing that come together in RTP is like super interesting for me to get that started in Boston too.
No, that's great. And soon, let's see, we could definitely start a tech walk here where it would be a tech, we're talking entrepreneurship, and we're stopping at local bars, restaurants, or breweries. And,
Hmm.
good for us, we've got one, two, three, four, soon to be five or six bars and or breweries between our building and the end of the street, which is what, like 200 yards away.
It's
So you don't have to
a
walk
long
that far.
walk,
Yeah,
Yeah.
long
long,
walking.
long
There'll be a lot of
walking.
stopping where they not
It's
gonna.
this tech pub crawl, which is also fun. It could be
There you
fun.
go.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So a related question is where I want to go with it. So parties with you kind of joining on with Smashing Boxes in Boston, and so I think bringing a little bit of what we do to Boston is great. And then you here bring a little bit of that of what Boston does well to the to innovation that we can help deliver here is great. So I just want to lean in a little bit to what those things could look like. And we've touched on them a lot, right? So I think in Raleigh, as an example, I'm curious your both your opinions. We've not had, it's not easy for us to say, I have an idea, let me go and put it on a piece of paper and get capital, and then I'll build it. I mean, we have to hustle. Like we have a very strong, hustle culture. If you want to start a business here, you got to find a way, and it's usually the hard way. And it's not that any entrepreneurial journey is easy, but we have to build first, and we have to get creative with how we build, which means we have to get creative with how we think about our MVP or solution architecting and all that stuff. Um, and I'm looking forward to you leading the charge and bringing that type of mentality to innovation and things that we can help with in Boston. So I want to get your thoughts on stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, Boston's kind of similar where it's like you can't raise unless you have some sort of revenue or traction, unless you have like a good big friends and family round, or if you're entrepreneurs who are like were part of another team before, like the PayPal Mafia or something, like they don't have any problems raising without a product. And that's why I'm interested and like really excited to have us in Boston because like we don't have anyone like that in Boston anymore. That's like, hey, let me help all these startups like figure out their ideas. Let's help them put something on paper. Let's turn this like MVP that's like five different products that you've like duct taped together into like one cohesive experience and kind of like show off what you're trying to do here. Like there's a little bit of that, but there's like no one that's like really like put their stamp on the ground and said like I'm going to do this and this is all I do now. So that's what I'm like really excited to bring over into Boston because I think that's like a big missing point right now. Just to, like give those like entrepreneurs like a little bit more like concrete like frameworks and templates to work within, so they actually like know what they're doing and they can get to that revenue faster. So then they can go and raise that capital and start their startup journey.
What about the flip side of that? What do you, and from the Boston culture, can we expect to be able to better serve the market in RTP?
Yeah, so for RTP, it's like we just move faster. And it's just helping them like think about like, hey, you don't have to like wait 10 years to get your first customer. Like let's build out your MVP right now. Let's get you out there and let's like help them and like incubate them and get them like, they just need like a little bit more training wheels to like get started faster, I think. When I was at Grandpapalooza, I was at the idea table. It wasn't even an idea, it was the MVP table. The MVP table was all ideas, and the ideas were great, but like everyone's like, "Oh yeah, maybe one day I'll start." And I'm like, "Well, why don't you start now?" And they were all very confused when I said that. And so it's just kind of getting that culture out there that like, maybe now isn't like like now doesn't have to be the right time or the wrong time. It's like now is the time. And I'm going to like take my idea and I'm going to make it actually happen.
And so, Nick, you tell me a little bit about kind of my last question on this. What you're excited about for
Sure.
Smashing Boxes
Yeah.
now with this, and how we expand
Yeah.
and go.
I think to Pardees' comment the very last one is, the best way to start is to start. And the more we can antagonize that, I think the better. I think, kind of bringing sort of a give first mindset to both markets is important to our kind of DNA, and being helpful and being willing to, just be a resource to see more things get going. I think more is just better. I think as it relates to agency business, it's sort of like the tsunami metaphor, the tsunami of just money and venture capital just pouring in and salaries going in. A lot of agencies just got absorbed by that rush, and they made way more money just taking jobs or getting acqui-hired or starting a venture and getting free money, zero into the ZERP period. And a lot of those people who did that don't want to go back to really, consulting and helping others, because they've got it too good. And we've sort of stayed the course on the agency side. And like to Bardees' point, here it's a similar here. There's not a lot of agencies that weren't, really acquired or just abandoned to go, make a ton of money from a super well capitalized West Coast company as the whole proliferation of higher remote, work remote occurred. So I'm excited to find our lane and to work with our team to step up in leadership roles in the ecosystem development of both markets. And we're not all things to all people, and it's not like we're not here to save the day, but just to find how we can continue to do our part and how to plug in the best way possible is something that I'm looking forward to here in the days, weeks, months to come.
All right.
Great question. Way to take us
All
all
right.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah,
it. Anything
that's
else?
it. Parties, thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining us.
that's it.
Picture actually, and then also thank you for joining us here for this conversation. I think that was really valuable, and I think there's, definitely some good nuggets of wisdom here for people to take away who tune in and listen. I think we're good. I think let's. If anyone enjoys this lighting, this is the podcast studio, sometimes referred to as ambient studio, inside of our co-working space. And it's like 10 a.m. So this is not, we're not exactly ready to start the nightclub vibes, but there's no time like the present for a little nightclub vibe. All right.
All right.
Any closing thoughts? Or are we ready to wrap?
I think we're good. Parties?
I'm good.
All
All
right.
right.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye, all.
Bye.
Bye.